Hey everyone, and welcome to another Risky Business product demo. My name's Patrick Gray. The idea behind these demos is we get one of our sponsors to join us and walk us through their products. All of these product demos are sponsored, and joining me today is Eoin Hinchy, who is the founder and CEO of Tines, which is a much-loved automation platform. Eoin and I previously did a walkthrough of the Tines platform, the fundamentals of the platform. That is mostly still up to date. So if you're interested in some general information about Tines, you can check that one out. I'll drop a link in right here. But yes, Eoin, good to see you, my friend. And today I believe you're going to be demonstrating the sort of LLM-enabled Tines. So you've added some AI magic to the product, and that's what you're going to walk us through with us today. And previously, you and I have done an interview for the podcast where you've talked about some of your plans in this area and your journey from being a skeptic to then going, oh, hang on, I think we can actually do something useful here. Why don't you walk us through roughly what it is that you've built?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Patrick, and good morning. Yeah, so this feels like a kind of a nice continuation of the conversations that we've had previously. And I think if I recall correctly, on that last podcast, I was kind of like brutally honest with how we were thinking about AI and generally how, as a security practitioner for like 15 years, how skeptical I was about any product that contained AI or mentioned that it had AI. And I think I had said that like a lot of it felt like BS rather than AI. And then about 2 years ago now, when we first started to see the emergence of LLMs and these kind of foundational models, just how quickly our views changed and how we realized that this actually was probably the single most transformative technology that we'd seen in a decade or more. But I was very honest and transparent, and I said, look, it's actually taking us a long time to figure out what we can do with this technology in the product that actually adds value to our customers. Because what we were seeing at that time, again, a year ago, 18 months ago, was a lot of products who were just, to your point, sprinkling AI and increasing the price, but it wasn't actually doing much and it wasn't adding value. And so we had something like 70 failed experiments trying to figure out how to get this technology into the product in a way that was robust and effective and so on. And then about 6 months ago, we landed on something that we were really excited about and happy about. And I think we talked about this previously, where we released two kind of AI-powered features into the core of the product that essentially allowed our customers to build better workflows and to run better workflows. And so for our customers who haven't, or for our viewers who haven't seen the product before, this is Tines. This is the core of the product. This is what we call our storyboard. And essentially, when you want to automate your workflows, you drag and drop these action types, as we call them, onto the workflow, and you connect them together to create this kind of diagrammatic representation of your workflow. Now, what's unique about Tines, rough maths here, is that everything that you build in Tines is always constructed using just these 8 basic things. Everything. So no matter what you're automating, no matter what the goal is, no matter what the technology stack, it's always just these 8 things configured in slightly different ways. And for the longest time, it was actually just 7 things. And then we added this AI action that essentially allows our customers direct access to a LLM running within the Tines tenant. So you can do things like, ask it to check this code for security vulnerabilities, and it will produce, when it runs, it'll produce things like, here's the code it received. And by just asking it, is there security vulnerabilities, it'll go and run a LLM and tell you if there's security vulnerabilities in it, et cetera, et cetera. So you can also do that things to do like check for CEO fraud. So check this email if it's a potential scam, and summarize and check this document for sensitivity. So that's what we released about 6 months ago, was this ability to have raw access to an LLM. But what was unique about this, it wasn't just this kind of like very powerful access to an LLM. It was the fact that the LLM was running in a secure and private way. So we're not taking your data and sending it off to some third-party subprocessor. We're not taking your data and sending it off to Google or Microsoft or OpenAI. We're actually running this foundational LLM within the Tines tenant. And so what that means is we can make these claims like there's no training of your data, there's no logging, we're not doing any fine tuning, you have complete control over the data residency and retention and all that kind of fun stuff. And honestly, that was one of the most important parts of this entire feature, was like how we were actually running this technology. Because now all of a sudden, security practitioners could have a lot of comfort that their data wasn't being used in some nefarious way. They had complete control over it.
Yeah.
And that was amazing, right? We had this technology now that allows our customers to access the power of AI, but in a secure and private way. And those were the features that we kind of released 6 months ago, and our customers are doing like really interesting things and using this in very powerful ways and so on. But once we had this kind of technology where we were able to run your most sensitive data, regardless of where it came from, through AI and LLMs, that really got our kind of like our juices flowing and thinking like, well, what else could we do now? Right now that we've got this ability to take the power of AI and apply it to data in a very sensitive and secure way, what else could we do? And that's really where Workbench came from, right? So we have this AI technology in the core workflow builder, but what else could we do? And so we started talking to our customers and we were like, AI is amazing, right? High fives, this is incredible. But like, how come you're not using it more, right? We're now 2 years into this journey of AI is going to change the way everybody works. And frankly, what we've seen has been completely underwhelming. Outside of a couple of niche use cases like code writing co-pilots or enterprise search or customer support.
Or as it turns out, just a lot of introverts using ChatGPT to help them write emails. Seems to be the and then my favorite thing is they feed it a prompt with some bullet points, they generate an email, they send it over to the other person who then uses a large language model to condense it back into the bullet points, which makes me think like in the future perhaps we should just send the bullet points. But anyway, do go on.
I'm with you, and it's amazing how many of these AI use cases like ultimately just descend into like writing an email, and that's kind of like that's been really like disappointing to me. Is that like we know this technology is amazing, why aren't we seeing it make everybody's job better and easier and more effective and productive? And when we spoke to our customers and asked them their thoughts, like, why aren't you using this more, outside of the security and privacy stuff, which I think is a bit of a given, there was kind of two things that they consistently mentioned. One was these foundational models are amazing, like incredible, like ChatGPT is magic and so on. But it's got very limited business impact because it doesn't understand my data, right? I can ask it to write an email all I want, but it has no access to my CrowdStrike alerts. It's got no access to my SIM. It's got no access to my HR systems. So it's actually very limited value because it doesn't have the access to the real-time and proprietary data that I need to like actually do my job. That was the first thing. And then the second thing was it can't actually do anything, right? It can't take action. It summarize and infer and rewrite and do all this stuff. But the second I needed to go and quarantine a device or reset a password or create a ticket, it can't do that because it again doesn't have access to my systems. And if it did, I wouldn't trust it to go and quarantine the device or fully analyze a phishing email. So with those
it'd
two
be
problems,
like you've got the sort of Skynet scenario there, only much, much stupider, basically, where all of a sudden it starts quarantining healthy devices for reasons unknown. And yes, like herpa-derpa Skynet, basically.
Totally. It's like a really confident drunk Skynet.
Yes.
And nobody wants that. And so, those were the two problems that we kind of like began to chew on. And we came up with Workbench. And so Workbench is a product that we're recording this in the middle of September. So we released this last week. So in mid-September 2024, we released Workbench. And you can think of Workbench as a Tines-powered AI chatbot. So if you've ever used ChatGPT or a similar tool, this will feel really familiar, right? So you've got this big chat interface in the middle where you get to talk to your LLM. What's different about this is the fundamental secure and private infrastructure that we're using. So when you're chatting to this, your data is not going anywhere. It stays in Tines. We're not sending it. There's no internet connectivity here. There's no data traversal. There's no fine tuning, etc. So I can do things like if I hop over here and I can take this like big long list of customer data and I can paste it straight into ChatGPT, or sorry, not ChatGPT, into Workbench. And I can do things like, analyze this data, let's say by location. And again, I'm pasting this in, but it's staying in Tines, right? This data doesn't go anywhere. And it's
well, I mean, just one thing. Sorry to interrupt you there, but that is one thing I have heard from other companies offering products that rely on large language models is that there is genuine concern out there about data leakage, right? About stuff leaking into these models and then leaking out to other users. It's not what you want. I mean, I think the protections there are probably reasonable, but no one can say for sure. And I think that's where that uncertainty it comes from. So, I can certainly understand why this is a selling point. 100%.
So, and I think as well, you're absolutely right to call it like how legitimate are those concerns, and there's a lot of
we don't know yet. We don't know yet. And I think that's the point. I mean, it could be fine, but we're not going to know for a few years, right?
Totally. And we're paid to be like healthy paranoids, right? Like that's very much our job. And so when we were building this, we were like, well, we have to be able to give like ironclad commitment that this data goes nowhere, that this stays in Tines. And so, I can do all the stuff that you can do with your LLMs and that LLMs are amazing at, like summarizing this data. And I can go break it down by country, for example. Break down by country. And again, it will go and understand all this. And so it gives me this power to like break it down. Here's the United States, Ireland, and it does all this like amazing summarization and so on and so forth. And I can still do this to, you write me an email to my boss asking for PTO tomorrow. So I can still do all the like writing emails and drafting stuff.
Yeah.
The only difference is that like, again, this data is staying in Tines. It's not going anywhere. And we're running, in this version here, we're running the open source Anthropic models. And so this is like Claude 3.5. So generally considered like one of the best models. So you have this like world-class LLM, but it's running inside Tines and any data that you pass to it is going to stay in Tines. So this is kind of like the basic of the product. You've got this chat interface that allows you to interact with an LLM and do the kind of stuff that you would classically do in ChatGPT. But that doesn't really solve our two big problems, right? No access to real-time or proprietary data and no ability to take action. And as you know, we've kind of spent the last 5-6 years building a product that gives people access to real-time proprietary data and allows people to take action across their stack regardless of what their tools look like, etc. And so what we've essentially done is we've taken what we're really good at, which is integrations, workflows, and we've combined it with what AI is really good at, which is understanding natural language, summarization, etc. So if I open a new chat here, and let's imagine I'm a security analyst who is tasked with investigating an incident, and I'm going to use Workbench to do it. So I don't know if you followed. Let me just pull up a link here. I don't know if you followed the Snowflake kind of 2FA furore there recently, but essentially,
it was a bit hard to miss when your job is to be an InfoSec journalist. But anyway, yeah, I did. But there might be people watching this who didn't. So
yeah. Well, look, essentially, the long and short of it was there was kind of like there was a lot of potential account compromise happening, and a lot of blue teams were tasked with understanding where they impacted. And this blog by TrustWave was what a lot of blue teams were using to investigate the incident. So this was kind of like being updated in real time. You had access to the emails, all the IP addresses and domains that were being used as droppers, etc., were being used. Your traditional AI models would have no access to this, right? This was being updated in real time. And so ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, they're not trained on this data. right? So you can't say, hey, what IP addresses are involved in the Snowflake breach, because it doesn't have access. In Tines, we have a workflow, right, that allows us to extract URLs from a blog page. It's a really common one that our customers use, and it's one of kind of like the 1,000 pre-built workflows that we provide to our customers. And so if I go to this workflow here, I'll see this is a standard Tines workflow that's designed for security teams to extract URLs from or extract IOCs from a URL. So really, really basic. So what I can do in Workbench is I can ask it, can you extract all the IOCs from this page? And I'll pass it through. And what Workbench is going to do is it's going to recognize that I've got access to a workflow in Tines called extract IOCs from a URL, and I'm going to go run it. And I'm going to pass through the URL that you have given me, and it's going to go and fetch all this information. So it's in real time reaching out to this URL, analyzing the page, and finding all these like IOCs. And so I can then do stuff like put the IPs in a table, make it easier to view. And it'll go and do that for me.
Now, if you're about to get to the point where you can go off and like query your detection stack against this with your chatbot, I'm about to be really impressed.
Okay, prepare to be really impressed. No,
one thing that occurs to me, sorry, Owen, but one thing that occurs to me is, I've covered this space, as you know, for a long time, and so many tools come along that have their own sort of query syntax. They have their own languages, right, to drive them. And I think, thankfully, that's one problem that LLMs have solved forever, which is gone are the days where you're going to have to learn an entire new query language for a security tool. Like, you just don't need that anymore.
I completely agree. And we've worked so hard over the last decade to break down those silos. Right, like so that you don't have to need to know like all these mad query languages.
Well, I mean, it's where you started, right? Because you started with pointy clicky, and now you've gone from pointy clicky to talky talky.
Totally. And what's really interesting, though, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is what we're seeing now is an emergence of a whole new type of silo, and we're seeing these companies try and get around this inability to take action through LLMs by introducing copilots. And so, every company is now releasing a product-specific copilot so that you can like have a chat interface with the data within that tool. And so what we're hearing from like CISOs is that like, oh man, now I have to buy all these individual copilots to go and interact with these products. And so one of the goals that we have with Workbench is to kind of allow people to not have to do that, to have just like this single, almost universal copilot to chat with your data, which I think is like an interesting trend that's going on. But look, anyway, I digress. You're right. So here's all the IP addresses that this is extracted. In this world, the next thing I would likely want to do is to investigate these IPs. So I could just say, analyze these IP and let me know if any are malicious. In the interest of time, I'm just going to pick one. So let's do, can you look up this IP? And I'll pass through like one of the IP addresses. So it was this one here. And so again, what's going to happen is it's going to recognize that it's got access to a Tines workflow called get IP address information. And it's gone and queried it in real time. And I can look at, this is the one that's enabled. So it's running it. It's doing a bunch of different stuff here. It's doing like a geolocation, network information. It's checking whether it's Tor, VPN, blacklist, etc., etc. And so it's running that. And I can actually see the raw data that's sent to and from the workflow. So there's no black box here, right? I can see exactly what's happening. And what's cool about this is, again, combining what Tines is great at, which is the connectivity, the real-time, the role-based access control, with what AI is amazing at, which is kind of like summarizing this data. So it's giving recommendations. We're not providing the recommendations. Workbench is providing the recommendations. So like it's saying, would you like me to investigate? Here's some malicious. However, it's important to note that the VPN usage itself isn't inherently malicious. All correct. But again, look, I found a bad IP address. And so what I might want to do next as kind of a blue teamer is like, do we have any cases related to this IP? So I'm now asking it, okay, look, I think this is a bad IP address. can you go and see if we have any historic cases related to this IP address? I'm completely in control here, right? Like this AI isn't running away here and doing all this up by itself. We're allowing you to kind of build trust in the platform here to kind of say like, okay, I'm going to take this step by step. I'm going to instruct you what to do. You just give me the results back. And here it's found a case for a brute force login detected from yesterday, related to Stephen. This is all the case information, and it's given more recommended actions. So lock the account, notify the account owner, block the IP address, review authentication logs, escalate. Perfect. Okay, so let's do who is Stephen? STEPH at Tines.io. And again, your classic LLM would have no idea about this, right? Like, how could it possibly know who Stephen.io is? What Tines is going to do is it's going to look this information up in my user directory. So it's going to look at my HRIS, Slack, G Suite, all these different products. And what's kind of cool about Workbench is that it's scoped to me. So it's only going to do the things that I personally have access to. So if I don't have access to like our HR system or Slack admin, it's not going to do that. It's only going to do the stuff that I do have access to.
Well, so, this is probably why you mentioned RBAC earlier, like role-based access control, right? So if you can,
correct.
Once you've got all of that in place, then restricting it through this should be doable, right? Because you did that work early on.
Bingo. And all the other stuff that we've done, like audit logs, change control, version history, all that kind of enterprise robustness capabilities, that's all automatically applied to Workbench, which is kind of like really, really neat. But here, look, we can see Stephen's head of product at Tines, password change. Look, immediately verify Stephen if he initiated the password change. I'm going to just say, let's reset his password. And let's see what it's. Again, I'm kind of being vague here, right? I'm not saying go and do it in Okta. I'm not saying do it in G Suite.
No, I get it. It's cool. Because it knows.
Because
it's got access to all of your stuff, right?
Yeah, totally. What else is fun about this is when it recognizes that it's a potentially big change or there's some sort of detriment, it will ask you to double check, right? So it's not going to go and like automatically reset this without confirming, and I can view exactly what information it's going to be sending through, and I like that. I'm going to confirm that. So I'm going to confirm that I want to reset Stephen's Okta password and reset his sessions. It goes and does that for me. It's giving me like a new password here, security follow-up, all this fun stuff, and it's going to say like, hey, here's some other stuff. Would you like me such as updating the case with information or drafting a communication? Yeah. Let's write an email to Stephen, but don't, if I could type it'd be helpful, don't include his password. And let's see, again, what AI is amazing at is like this kind of like emails, urgent, your Okta password has been reset, key points, spot on, right? So this is all going to be good.
Well, I mean, this is different to people feeding it bullet points because it already has the context, right? So
yeah. And it's saying exactly when it was reset. So this is like a really relevant email. And the other thing I can do is I could say, if I wanted, send them the email. And because it's connected to Gmail or Slack, I could actually have them contact it directly. So we think this is kind of fun and cool, and we've been running, although we only released it last week, we've been running kind of like an early adopter program with like a lot of our customers, and there's genuine excitement about like how this can be used. And I think what's different about this compared to like the core version of the product is this is obviously a lot easier to use, right? Like, although Tines is a very easy to use product, there's still a degree of a learning curve required. You still have to understand what these things do.
You have to know the product, right? It's an easier product to learn than most, but you still have to know it.
Totally. And we like to say that we can teach anyone how to use Tines in several hours, but there's no teaching required here, right? This is literally
Yeah.
just describing what I want, seeing what templates I have available, and so on. And we provide all these out of the box connectors. So if I wanted to, let's say, connect to Slack, all I would have to do was like go connect here, um, connect a new credential, and then automatically I've got access to all these things that I can do on Slack. And I can choose what abilities I want Workbench to inherit. So if I just wanted to be able to kind of like send messages, I can just give it that permission.
Let me ask you too, because I saw earlier you had, a bunch of stuff down the left, like, CrowdStrike and whatnot.
Yeah.
With those IPs, can you ask, hey, has CrowdStrike seen anything with these IPs? Can you ask your NDR tool? Can you say, hey, I think we need to block this IP or this series of IPs? Like, how far down that rabbit hole can you go? Because that would be, because doing that stuff is just time consuming, right? Like, it's not particularly complicated, but even when you've got all of that stuff there, it's a pain. It's absolutely a pain. So, how far down that rabbit, you've got Darktrace there, I see, all sorts. So,
and these are just the what we call like the pre-built integrations. So, the real power of Tines is that it can connect to anything and essentially do anything. It can automate any action, regardless of what your tools are, et cetera, et cetera. So you can go as deep as you want. So if you wanted to go and like block IP addresses, if you wanted to go and like query CrowdStrike, you can do all that. You just need to turn them on, right? That's all you need to do. And there's kind of like two different ways that you can, or two different sets of skills that Workbench has. One is these pre-built integrations, and then the other is any workflow that's created in Tines. And so here, for example, we've got like fairly complicated workflows like enrich CVEs, search Jira, get info from Salesforce. All I need to do is turn them on, and then Workbench has the ability to access it, right? So if I go, let's pick one, let's do a kind of an interesting one here. So let's say I needed to connect to some internal system, right? Where it's something we built ourselves inside our company that lets us interact with our company blog, right? We, like, as a company at Tines, we don't have an integration for your internal company blog, right? That's not something that we would ever have access to.
So you're talking about some sort of internal horror show, probably coded in Java, way too much Java, absolute enterprise crapware. I know exactly the sort of thing you're talking
about. Running on
like
a Dell machine underneath someone's desk, like that kind of system.
Yeah, enterprise grade.
Exactly. So let's say, for example, you then want to connect to some internal system that's like accessing data from your blog. So here I've got a workflow. If I go to, again, the core of the product, and I search for blog, I've built a Tines workflow that allows me to connect to these systems. So here I've got three different types of content. I've got posts, comments, and profiles. But as you can see, this isn't like an internet accessible URL. This is running on some internal network that isn't aware of. But Tines can connect to this, again, because we can access any system. So I'm running like a reverse proxy that allows me to connect to this. So let's say I wanted to enable this data source inside of Workbench. All I need to do is like 2 clicks. So I go to settings and I turn on for Workbench, and I can just turn on for Workbench, but actually let's just turn on for Workbench. So now if I go back to Workbench and I just refresh and I search for blog, here I've got this get content from an internal blog. And so all I need to do is turn it on. And now I can do something like, how many posts do we have on our blog? And it should recognize that, okay, well, I've got access to a workflow called get content from internal blog. And it's going to run it again in real time, query that internal system, get the data back, hopefully, and do what AI does best, which is like summarize the information. So I've got 20 posts. Here's a review of all the posts. And again, this isn't some well-known system, right? This is like an internal system that Tines is access to. How many comments?
How many are controversial? Are there any we should delete?
There you go. That's a great. Well, let's actually do that to see how it does, because again, it's the blurring between what AI is amazing at and what like Workbench or Tines is amazing at that I kind of like here. So here's the 15 comments. So if we do are any of the any of the comments mean? Right? Like again, this is as simple as as asking it the question, and let's see what it thinks. There we go. So it's identified that one is mean, which is the comment is whoever wrote this post clearly didn't have a clue what they were talking about. The comment is notably harsh and dismissive compared to others. Who wrote that post?
And can you dispatch a drone?
Yeah. So
this is going to solve so many problems.
There we go. So written by Eoin Hinchy. Eoin Hinchy clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. But again, like it's kind of fun, right? Like the fact is, here are some potential next steps. Review the content to ensure it's accurate. Consider reaching out to the commenter privately. Would you like that? Like really, really fun stuff. And again,
send the hired goons. Would you like some hired goons? I think that's the way. That's how we do it.
But that's Workbench, dude. That's what we're really excited about. We are kind of excited about like how this does transform the way people work, because like I think it clearly has the power, but we won't really understand fully until we see how security teams adapt and change based on this. Because well, like one thing we've learned over the last few years is that there's a huge amount of work that's really predictable and deterministic, and that's where your workflows come in, where you can kind of predict the same path all this time. But there's also a huge other amount of work which like isn't deterministic and isn't super clear and does require creativity to investigate. And that's kind of where Workbench comes in. So where these tasks are like ad hoc and require updating and changing over time, this is where Workbench comes in. And then for everything else, you've got your workflows.
Where they require sequencing. Like I'm doing some work with a company that uses LLMs to do stuff in the SOC, right? Around incoming alerts and investigating them and things like that. And it's, they're really good at that sort of repetitive work that requires, well, now I've got to go look up this and look up that and then try to, pull this information together and make a determination. LLMs are really good at that. So yeah, I 100% get it. And this is 1.0, right? Like
correct.
This is the beginning, not the ending, which is mind-blowing, really.
Yeah.
Eoin Hinchy, fantastic to see you again. I always enjoy our conversations. Thanks for walking us through Workbench. By the way, before I sign off there, this is just out now, right? So this is brand spanking. Yeah. So have you had it in...
Sorry, I was just going to say, brand spanking new. It's in the hands of customers for quite a while, early adopters. What we're particularly proud of is this is also fully available in our community edition. So all our free users get access to Workbench as well. And one of the reasons we did that, it was a bit of a controversial decision, but one of the reasons we did it is because we think this does have the potential to change how everyone works, and so we want everybody to have access. So if you want to sign up, just go to tines.com and create a free tenant, and Workbench will be available.
That's fantastic. I mean, my next question was actually going to be if you've had beta testers and what their response has been like.
We have. So we've got folks like MongoDB, Brex, Okta, folks like that using it. Feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I know I kind of like have to say that, but it really has been unusually positive, I would say. And I think what's different about the reaction we're getting from Workbench to the core product is just how quickly people see use cases. There was a point where with our core product, it might take a couple of minutes for somebody to be like, the light bulb goes off. They're like, I could use this for XYZ. But with Workbench, it's instantly someone's like, oh man, I could have used this like earlier on today. Or, I've got the exact use case for this. And it's almost instantaneous.
Yeah. Take away the parts of their jobs they don't like and they can see it immediately. All right, I promise I'm wrapping it up now. Eoin Hinchy, great to talk to you, my friend. And we'll do it again soon. Thanks again.
Take care.